Welcome back to this series called Gateway to the Holocaust. I know that's a very provocative title, but that's where we find ourselves. Israel is being betrayed by the world at large. With social media having replaced the mainstream media, Israel is the butt of most posts. The rhetoric against God's people is more grotesque than it has ever been at any time in human history. The rage against Jews exceeds what the world experienced in Europe in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. It led to the Holocaust by a factor of at least 100-fold. Blood is already running in our streets, and it's going to get so much worse. Part of the problem is that today, this rage against Israel comes from three places, and one of those three, the one that people are the least aware of, is about to become the most diabolical. And let me explain. From its inception, 1400 years ago, Islam has been grossly anti-Semitic. It has been genocidal, particularly related to Jews. And it has imposed apartheid and colonialization of the worst kind everywhere it has gone. Muhammad and the first Muslims perpetrated genocide against Jews in Arabia. And in the first 100 years of Islam, Muslims managed to enslave, rape, rob, and murder 200 million people, a third of the Earth's population at the time. It is it's the deadliest religion in human history. And so we are seeing Islam now spurred on by the carnage of October 7th as they celebrate the worst behavior, perhaps in human history. I don't think you can find a time where people celebrated, screaming their God's name while gang raping women and torturing them in the process of gang raping them, and then mutilating them and murdering them, abducting grandmas, for crying out loud, committing acts of mass murder, burning babies alive. It was the most grotesque example of human savagery in the history of the planet. And it has been celebrated as a religious rite. There is no time ever where this has been done. You can say, okay, well, the Nazis documented the Holocaust. And yes, there were some savage acts of the Holocaust, but for the most part, while it's deplorable, the Nazis brought Jews in cattle cars to the death camps and killed them with Zyklon B gas. They didn't gang rape them. They didn't cut out unborn children from their bellies as they watched. They didn't slice off their breasts and play with them as if they were balls. They didn't burn the children alive. They killed them first. I mean, it's horrible. Obviously, it's grotesque what the Nazis did. But these Muslims were worse. And they're going to be far more vicious still. Screaming Allahu Akbar, they tortured well over 2,000 people. They're still torturing them. And the world has erupted in favor of these genocidal, maniacal sadists. We've just never seen anything like it, ever. Yeah, I understand that I just said that Islam began its genocidal rage against humankind and in particular Jews 1400 years ago. And they were savage. They cut off, in Yathrib, they cut off the heads of every Jewish man and boy. They raped every Jewish woman. They sold all of the children into slavery to buy more weapons. That is heinous. When they then attacked the last remaining enclave of Jewish settlers in Arabia at Kabar, they did torture some, and they again raped the women. They sold the children into slavery. They stole everything they had to their possessions. They committed mass murder against the men, and they screamed Allahu Akbar, giving their ungod credit for what they were doing. It was religious savagery. The worst the world had ever experienced up to that point. And it is true that what happened on October 7th is simply a reenactment of what Muhammad did at Kabar 1400 years ago. It's the exact same scenario. No different, really. And while we have seen the world perpetrate this savagery, and they filmed it, and we've seen Muslims celebrate their savagery worldwide, take pride in what they have done. We have a second layer to it now, because Marxists that have always been complicit in the ethnic slur and genocidal slogan of Free Palestine, they created it with the Muslim Brotherhood back in 1968. They are now in lockstep. They are the pimps of Islamic rage. And so, in addition to 2 billion murderous Muslims, you now have 1 billion murderous, violent, enraged, psychotic Marxists. You can call them leftists, you can call them socialists, you can call them progressives, you can call them woke, you can call them Antifa, you can call them whatever you want to call them, but the fact is, they are Marxists. They are socialists. They are extreme liberals. They like the term progressive, but it's a regressive belief system, and they have rallied around the cause of these savages. 3 billion people. And the problem with the Marxists supporting the Muslims is that the Marxists give the Muslims a sense of legitimacy and credibility. And they also change the dynamic in terms of governments and the way governments work, because in the last 40 years, almost everyone who has been educated has actually been indoctrinated in Europe and the United States in Marxist, progressive, libertard culture, where no one is thinking. Everyone is indoctrinated. We have an entire generation, and perhaps 2 now, in America and Europe, that have dysfunctional consciences, that are incapable of exercising good judgment, that are clueless when it comes to evidence and reason, and they are spouting platitudes that are not only entirely hypocritical, completely errant, totally irrational, they are grossly immoral, and yet they're proud of it. And to this, now we have to add the MAGAs. You would have thought that the quote-unquote conservatives on the right would be in opposition to the numbskulls of libertardism that have become Islamic pimps. And while they lash out at them, they are about to coalesce in agreement in opposition to Israel. Trump has been bribed by the Saudis, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, the International Bank of Islamic Terrorism, the birthplace of Islam, by $16.5 billion over the last 4 years, Trump and company. I have pointed all this out. I've laid the facts out. They're irrefutable. Trump's own people admit to them. $16.5 billion. It's a lot to give one man to own him, to pull his strings. And Trump did it, for the money, certainly. But he also did it because he wants to, his ego is so great that he is just enthralled with his deal making and thinks that he's going to be the one who does the deal of the millennia by his own acclaim. And that deal of the millennia is going to be the normalization of relationships between Muslim countries and Israel. The problem is that no deal between a Muslim and a non-Muslim is ever binding on the Muslim. Read the 9th surah of the Quran. Read the Hadith. It's Allah makes it obvious that any treaty between a Muslim and a non-Muslim is not binding on the Muslim. So the promises that are made on behalf of the Muslims will be useless. And the Quran says that all Muslims must die killing for Allah until the only religion on earth is Islam. These are facts. That's in the 8th surah. 8th and 9th surah tells you everything you need to know. The consequence of that deal is that Israel is being served up on a silver platter. The world, with Donald Trump now supporting the Islamic agenda and the Marxist agenda, is going to sacrifice Israel to both. And there's going to be a Palestinian state when, in fact, there are no such things as Palestinians. It is nothing but a ethnic slur designed to perpetrate genocide against Jews, and it will be used for its intended purpose, which is to make Israel indefensible. The prophets have spoken about it. It is unequivocal. It's going to happen. It's going to happen over the next year. It's going to be Trump who is mostly responsible, according to the prophet Isaiah in the 18th chapter, and we are witnessing it now. And the MAGAs worship Donald Trump. From the MAGA perspective, Donald Trump is a goddamn god. They say he is God's chosen. Nothing can stop him. They have drunk the Kool-Aid laced with religious poison. There is nothing worse on this planet than the Babel, this intermixing and commingling of politics and religion, and the MAGAs have it bad. And when someone criticizes Donald Trump, the MAGAs all join ranks to support their God man. He is the new Messiah of the political world for those who are on the right. And they're vicious. They're as vicious as Muslims. They're as vicious as the Marxists. This is how shrill and how enraged both sides of the political debate have become, and how misguided they all are. They're claiming that Trump is God's man when he is the man who accepted $16 billion worth of bribes from the very Muslims that seek to annihilate them and that have been annihilating them for 14 centuries. This is where we find ourselves. And in our program here in the Rainbow Studio just yesterday, I read throughout Yeshayahu 18 to demonstrate conclusively that the woe, this warning against the nation and the Gentile that has severed Israel at the waist, making Israel indefensible by the imposition of a terrorist state is the United States and America and Donald Trump. And there's no arguing with it, not if you want to be informed. And yet so many of the MAGAs are Christians and carry around Isaiah and their Bibles and haven't a clue as to what it says. But that's why we've done this series. It's condemning of the United States and Donald Trump. And when God says, woe to you, that's a really bad thing. Because why? It's going to be tragic for Jews, and 2 out of every 3 are going to die worldwide. That's 10 million Jews. Almost twice as bad as the Holocaust, all because of this miscalculation. And I want you to understand the miscalculation isn't just for the bribes. It isn't just because Donald Trump wants to win the prize for doing the deal of the millennia. And those are driving factors, huge driving factors. It's also because Donald Trump is aware that he has screwed up the economy of the United States to the extent that the euro is likely to replace the dollar as the world's reserve currency, along with the Chinese yuan. And that Russia and China together are exceedingly powerful now. And that the EU, Russia, and China overwhelm the U.S. in terms of trade now, particularly with Trump's tariffs. And with America having a $40 trillion deficit, the largest in the world, and among the largest in terms of percentage of GDP, and increasing that with Trump's new budget. The dollar losing its reserve currency status as a result of it no longer being the favored currency of world trade because it's now such a hindrance to world trade. All of the world is working against the US dollar and its reserve currency status now because of that. And the only way to prolong the illusion of solvency under these conditions is through the petrodollar in Saudi Arabia, which is largely why Saudi Arabia has Trump on a string. All 3 reasons. They've all coalesced together at this time as a result of the miscalculations and of the unintended consequences of Donald Trump. And the result will be American economic collapse, world war, because Trump has played the situation in the proxy war against Russia foolishly. He's been played for a fool in terms of Iran's nuclear program. And collectively between these 2 situations, and now arming and abetting Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates over Israel, and then slicing Israel up, he has become the next Neville Chamberlain. His Czechoslovakia is Israel. His Adolf Hitler is MBS, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. His Nazism is Islam. The result is world war, but this time it's going to be marked in billions of lives, not millions of lives. I'm not telling you something that I want to happen. I'm not telling you something that I believe will happen. I'm telling you something that I know is going to be the result because the prophets have said so. And I understand what the prophets have written as well as anybody alive. And so that is why I'm sharing this with you. It's why it's so important for you to know it. And you need to know the cause. You need to know the consequence. That is why we have done this series of programs. It's now the force of 3 matched by the force of 2 more, all against Israel. A force of 3. 2 billion Muslims, 1 billion progressives, all of whom are young and they're influencing their countries and their leadership. In terms of the right-wing wackos and conspiratorialists that comprise the MAGAs of the United States and the their ilk around the world. There's about 1 billion of those. 4 billion people. And then between the Chinese and the Russians, and I don't think the average Russian gives two hoots about what's going on in Israel. I don't think the average Chinese does as well. And even though between the two, you got just shy of 2 billion people that would be among them, the fact of the matter is that their governments are now in opposition to Israel. The Chinese government's in opposition to Israel, even though I think the Israelis buy more Chinese products than they do from any other country in the world. Because of the fact that Chinese purchase and sell more to the Islamic countries by such a huge margin, and they also share in the enormity of the pipeline project from the Caspian Sea that brings gas into China to run its industry. And therefore, it is locked in with the Iranians and with Muslims. The Chinese actually buy more oil from Saudi Arabia than does the United States. And Russia now, because of the proxy war the United States caused, going back 17 years ago, to reenact the Cold War to make it a hot war. George Bush, Obama, McCain, Lindsey Graham, Trump won, Boris Yeltsin in the UK, all have conspired, along with NATO, to bring this war to Russia by arming the Ukraine as a proxy. And there is no outcome for that war that is good. And most outcomes, because now it is a lost cause, because the EU is absolutely mad about pursuing the war. And so there's no way of disarming Ukraine. And the United States is still the largest supplier of weapons to Ukraine. And so long as the United States continues to supply weapons to the Ukraine, and Europe continues to tell Ukraine, oh, you're not going to lose any land. No, we're going to give you all the weapons you need to beat Russia. And it's utter nonsense. Ukraine's out of troops. More weapons in Ukraine, unless the Europeans are going to go in and fight this war themselves, isn't going to make any difference. And if the Europeans fight the war themselves, we're in World War III, and the world as you know it is over. It can't be won, because because this point, with the combined military prowess of the United States, UK, France, Germany, and NATO, Russia's winning. And if Russia were to lose, if you were to turn that tide somehow, which would be incredulous, they would resort with a nuclear attack to prevent catastrophe for them. There's no way to win. It's just brain dead what the world is doing. We're in a position where Trump is pretending to talk to the Iranians after they've already enriched all the uranium they need and created all the tritium they need for 30 bombs, and have the missiles at the ready, and have the fuel for those missiles and all the technology they need to build 30 bombs, all much more savage than what was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And now he wants to chit-chat with them. And he wants to preclude Israel from protecting itself. Man's gone mad. Literally, he's gone mad. He's in love with his own authority, as if he's the king of the world, and everything he's doing is counterproductive. And the MAGAs eat it up as if he were God on earth. And so now you have China, the economic engine of the world, the manufacturing might of the world, and Russia, the second most powerful military in the world, that is currently kicking the ass of NATO, the United States, and Europe combined in Ukraine, and a nuclear-armed Iran with China, Russia, and Iran being in bed with each other because of the miscalculations of the United States, and all against Israel. And the United Nations scheduled to meet within the week to destroy Israel by imposing a Palestinian state, with Palestine not describing a ethnicity, not describing a nationality, not describing anything more than a Muslim, Islamic, and Marxist leftist plot to perpetrate genocide on Jews. That's all it is. That's where we find ourselves. And the reason I care, beyond the fact that it's right to care, we should want to do what we can to warn the world about impending nuclear holocaust. We should want to do all we can to inform the world that God's people are Israel, and it has consistently prevailed that the prophecy that God gave, curse them and he will curse you, prevails. Bless them and he will bless you. And the United States, Russia, China, Muslims everywhere, and Marxists the world over now wear the badge. I hate Israel. I'm against God. Have brought the wrath of Yahweh upon me. That's where we are. I care. I care deeply about the result of the time of Jacob's troubles, and that all of this is leading to the deaths of what will be 2 of every 3 Jews. That would be 10 million Jews. Pains me, hurts me to know that's going to occur, and that I can help those who will listen, but I cannot stop what is been reported in our past regarding our future from occurring, playing out exactly the way that Yahweh has witnessed it. Not desires it to happen, but certainly has witnessed it having occurred in our future and reported in our past, which is the nature of future history that's called prophecy. But I can protect those who are willing to listen. And that is my job. And that's what we're reading right now as we go deeper into Yeshaya 18. God is telling you exactly that if you want to survive this, whether you be a Yisraelite, Yehudim, or you are a Goyim, if you want to survive this, God wants you to listen. He wants you to read, and he wants you to respond and do exactly as I am telling you now, because I speak for him. Now that we have finished Yeshaya Isaiah 2, we enter Yeshaya Isaiah 18:3. All of, that means the entirety of, Kol. You who inhabit Yasab, those who live upon this perverted planet, the earth, Tabel, the world, the inhabitable parts of a confused world, which is in the process of destroying itself from Tabel. Bel is the Lord is Satan. This is the chamber of the Lord. What God is saying is that this world, he left. God left this world during the Exodus. Jews, which he tried to befriend, to elevate, to nurture, to protect, to enrich, to enable through his presence and through his Torah, making them his children, were so irascible, so disagreeable, that God says, I'm done with you. Moshe couldn't stand you either. He says, I'm done with you. Both of them bailed on you because you were too miserable, and neither has changed in that regard. By the time you get to Hosea, God's announcing the divorce. I said, yeah, I'm gone. You're not my children. I have divorced you. Our relationship is over, and I'm not returning to you until you return to me, which is the purpose of the YAHOWAH blog, which is the purpose of the Yada Yahowah series of books, free at yadayah.com. And so the earth, with Yahowah having left, he left us with, his prophetic discourse, so we fully capable of finding out who he is, what he's offering, what he's expecting in return, how we should respond to him. It's all there. And fortunately, no one paid any attention to it. And so the earth has become the playground of the Lord, and the Lord is Satan. So all of you who inhabit this perverted earth, this playground of the Lord, and also those who dwell in the land. Now, the land is Israel. So this is a message to everyone on earth, and especially to Israel. When, accordingly, and as soon as, by association and simultaneously, when the Nesh, the sign and banner, the means to effectively gain people's attention, to communicate with them such that all can be rallied to the point of action, drawing them together so that they engage in a productive manner, all by conveying the most important information conspicuously within the community. Nesh, sign and banner from Neshish, to be raised. I just want you to process that for a moment. God is saying that the solution for those who will pay attention to it is a Nesh. We're in Isaiah Yeshayah 18. Do you know when the Nesh is introduced by Yeshayah? It's in the 11th chapter. After the first 10 chapters excoriate Judaism, God says, I am disgusted by your religious practices and your holidays. All of it to me is putrid. I am so sick of what you have done religiously. I'm about ready to vomit. Paraphrased. Not very much, but paraphrased somewhat. God introduces the cure. The cure for all that ails Israel and the earth is a fellow named the Choter. A Choter. He is a branch from the main branch. So he's a stem off the main branch of the tree of lives, which would be he's a stem off the branch that is Dod to David. He is also a branch off of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil so that you can make intelligent decisions. He is a sucker from the fallen root, fallen stump, and the existing rootstock from which Dod David emerged, that represents the fallen state of Israel. And he is the rod of divine judgment. That's the Choter. Dod, the former and returning king of Israel, the Son of God, the Messiah, wrote about this Choter in the 14th Mashal. The entire 14th Mashal is devoted to him, just as the entire chapter of Isaiah 11 is devoted to him. And in both, he is described the same way. He is imbued with an exceedingly high level of intelligence, uncommon even among any men, even beyond the most intelligent who has lived thus far, Dod David. He is equally brave and bold as Dod. His understanding is even greater than Dod's. Dod was given the Spirit of Yahowah, came upon him, never left him. The Choder is given 7 spirits, including the Spirit of Yahowah, the Ruach of Yahowah, along with the Ruach of wisdom and intelligence, the Ruach of understanding and comprehension, the Ruach of being able to perceive the entire picture that God is painting for the first time in human history and then convey it to you. The spirit of great courage and capacity, boldness beyond measure, spirit of knowledge, so that there is a foundation upon which all of this can be based and documented and evidenced, in the spirit of respect and reverence for Yahweh and his name. 7 spirits of Yahweh, all placed on this one man, never happened in human history. When Moshe began, he had a singular spirit of Yahweh, and when he melted down and fell flat on his face and gave up and said, God, you might as well kill me, no one can communicate with or be effective with the children of Israel. They're impossible. God agreed with him and said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to take the spirit I have that is in you, and I'm going to knock it down 70-fold. I'm going to give it to 70 other elders of Israel. And what you're going to witness is that when I spread this spirit out, they are worthless. Not a single one of them that will contribute anything. So you got 1/70 of the Ruach on Moshe. You have a full Ruach on Dod. You have 1/70 of a spirit on useless elders of Israel that accomplished nothing according to God, which kind of runs in the face of the Talmud, doesn't it? And yet this Choder, who was a late arrival, the one that writes this Nesh, that God is lifting up at this time, he's imbued with the 7 spirits of Yahweh, including the very spirit, the Ruach of Yahweh. And in Isaiah 11, God's very clear. It's the Choder who writes the Nesh, this sign, this banner that is being lifted up. And it is the very sign and banner that we're told by the prophet Zechariah that Yahweh is going to scroll. That's going to make this huge scroll that is this Nesh that is going to play above the heads, above the Temple Mount of the final 2 witnesses. One is the Choder, the other is Elia. And that's what's going to play for the world to see. That is this Nesh. It is being lifted up for this purpose. If you want to see it, you want a sneak preview, go to YAHOWAH.com. Read any one of the 35 books on the shelf. You want to see it, continue to play these programs from the Yahowah blog. You are witnessing that Nesh. You're looking at the Choder who wrote it and is proclaiming it. And so this Nesh is lifted up. Nasha is raised. It's respected by God. This is described using the call infinitive construct, which serves as a verbal noun to identify and to emphatically demonstrate God's intent in raising this Nesh. He doesn't write the Nesh. He raises it. Because the man that he inspired with his 7 spirits wrote it. Wrote it based upon God's testimony, but nonetheless, that was his job. God works through people. Everything that God does is important, is through someone that God chose to convey that message, to do that thing. The Choder is the one whom Yahweh selected to do this. He is also called the Nakri, Why is he called the Nakri? Because he's an observant and responsive foreigner, not of your Yisrael. Why is he a responsive and observant foreigner? Because there was no one in Israel, not for 2,500 years, no one among Yehudim Jews who was willing to listen to God, that would write anything consistent with what God wanted said. And then this says, and shone on high from above. This nesh is going to be put in the skies. It's going to be hung from the heavens. It is endorsed by God himself. It's Harim, appearing above all, on the mount and the mountains, from Harar, to emerge, appear, loom, show, and reveal from above. Its purpose will be for you to become perceptive. Ra'ah, its intent will be to provide insights and understanding from all of you who are willing to be observant and thoughtful and consider what you're witnessing. Gaining a perspective by paying attention so as to understand. It was scribed in the call stem, means literal, genuine, imperfect conjugation, ongoing, and juice of mood, which is the third person expression of volition, and thus addressing the purpose and the intent of this sign. For all of those who are genuinely observant, with the benefits unfolding over time. And also, when the shofar, according to and as soon as, by association and simultaneously as, the shofar, the trumpet comprised of a ram's horn, used for signaling that which is symbolic of the purpose of, when is the shofar blown? Shabuah and Towrah. What is the person that Yashayah describes as the Choder, as the Nakri, as the final Zeroah, as the Kol voice of Yahowah? What is his primary job? Do you know? Why is the shofar being listed here? Yes, he is the one, according to Yashayah, that writes this nesh that God lifts up. I've got 35 books, the most comprehensive study on the Torah ever written. Most complete analysis of the prophets ever delivered. Amplified translations derived from the oldest extant resources of the Dead Sea Scrolls, scrubbed of the diacritical markings so that there's none of the rabbinic malfeasance associated with them, so that you would know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and that because of the way they're written, you can examine every single word under a microscope through dictionaries and lexicons online and validate that it is all true. The shofar. The ram's horn is important because the ram is Dod, our king. Our ram's horn is a sign of Dod's power. He is our king. He is our prior king. He is returning as king, king of the universe. He's going to be here in 8 years. I am his herald. The shofar is important because the shofar is blown for 2 of the 7 Moed Mikre, the 2 that I'm most responsible for. Dod fulfilled the important ones. Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim. With Pesach, he opened the doorway to life. On Matzah, he took the covenant family's guilt and deposited in Sheol, never to be seen again, perfecting us. On Bekurim, the Bakor, the firstborn son of God, signed our adoption papers into God's eternal family, awarding us this enormous inheritance of the covenant so that God could empower and enrich and emancipate and enlighten us. Dod fulfilled those first 3. The Shabuah harvest that is announced by the shofar that takes place in 12 months from this program, 22 May of 2026, the beginning of the time of Yaakov's or Israel's troubles, 7 years before Dod returns, is announced with the blowing of a shofar. And the choder is the Zeroah, responsible for cultivating that harvest. If you want to be part of it, you need to read what I have written. You need to listen to what I have to say. I am here for that purpose. But there is yet another harvest, one at the end of the time of Yaakov's troubles, for the one out of every 3 Jews who survived this time of Israel's confinement and abuse. And it is the shofar for which Towrah is named. I was called 24 years ago on Towrah for this mission. And it is on the evening of Towrah, a Friday evening, the beginning of the Shabat, 23 September 2033, exactly year 6000 Yah, 7 years after the shofar is blown on Shabuah, sevens, that the shofar will be blown again for the final gleaning of a remnant of Israel, as a result of what they have heard Elia and Yada say, what they have read on this scrolling Nesh sign. And this will be the final opportunity to become immortal and to live among the stars with Yahowah. But as the sun rises the next day, the Shabbat of Towrah, 24 September 2033, year 6000 Yahs, just now 10 days before the Messiah, Son of God, King Dod, returns with Yahowah on Yom Kippurim. The one who has written that Nesh, that sign that God is uplifting, he's going to sign it in blood, his own. He is going to lay down his life as the Adamah Parah, the bloody red man of the earth, who is productive and fruitful, cultivating these harvests. He is known as the red heifer. Don't be looking for a red cow. Just like the Passover lamb is symbolized by a lamb, in its fulfillment, it was the body of an extraordinary man, David, who fulfilled it just as he said he would in the 22nd and 88th Mizmor, where he described his death by Roman crucifixion 1,000 years before he endured it. Yes, indeed. In 33 CE, the Messiah and Son of God, David, fulfilled Passover on the right date, just as he said he would, and he was crucified by the Romans. The whole myth of Jesus is a ripoff, a robbery, identity theft, a crude counterfeit of David, although slathered with a high dose of Dionysus to give him a man-god image and to create the myth of the resurrection. Otherwise, it's David. And so the purpose of that sacrifice of the man who will sign this Nesh in his own blood, by offering his life as the red heifer, the Adamah Parah, on Towrah in 2033, year 6000 Yah, as orchestrated by the man who has done this very thing before, excoriating and condemning Israel's propensity to be religious and political, Elia, over the sacrifice of a bull, as God lights the flames and releases the torrents of water. It is Elia that will do this very thing to prepare the adulterous woman that is Israel for the return of her king so she can be betrothed to him. That is what's going to occur. That is why the mention of the shofar. It speaks of issuing that same warning, of getting people's attention. It is blown to convey a signal that whose blast encourages the listeners to join together, to make a pledge, to change, to depart where they are so that they can benefit from the one delivering that message. And the prophet says, when the shofar is blown, when that nesh is raised, listen, Shama. This is something that Israel has a very difficult time doing. They'd much rather blabber away to God with rote prayers. They'd even take the Shama Yisrael, which says, listen to Yahweh. Yahweh is one. They would rather spout it out than listen to Yahweh. And yet, if you're not willing to listen to Yahweh, then you can't engage in a relationship with him. Shama. Consistently, actually, continually, and genuinely hear the sound and receive the message and pay attention to the invitation and summons that is being delivered. Call imperfect. This is Yashayah. Salvation is from Yahweh. Isaiah 18:3. I want to go back to the beginning. I'm going to read it all the way through to you, and then we'll talk about what you've just heard. All of the entirety of those of you who inhabit the earth, and also those who remain and dwell in the land, this remnant of Jews in the land. When the nesh, this sign and banner, this means to effectively gain your attention, to communicate, rallying you to action, is lifted up and is shown on high from above. Its purpose will be for you to become perceptive, for you to witness and understand. And also, when the shofar is blown, when it is sounded, when it conveys this signal in association with Shabuah and Towrah, listen. You're not listening to the sound of the trumpet. You're listening to the sound of the trumpeter. He is the troubadour of Towrah. He is the voice of Towrah. He is the literal fulfillment of Towrah. He is the one cultivating the Shabuah harvest. Listen to him. It's part of the YAHOWAH blogs. That's why we're doing the YAHOWAH blog. Listen to him. Well, this message is being addressed not only to Yahweh's people, but to the entire world at this time for the very reasons that I announced before we delve into the 18th chapter, 3rd verse of Yeshaya Isaiah. It designates the world and God's people, the inhabitants of this planet, and those living in the land. It is for every Israelite everywhere on earth at this moment in time. Babel speaks of the inhabited places of the earth which are confused and perverted. It's a compound of Ta and Bel. Therefore, it is the Lord's realm. And as we have discovered, Baal, the Lord, is Satan's name and title because he wishes to lord over everyone and to be worshipped as if he were a god. This message is for those who remain and dwell in the land, and thus for the remnant of Yisrael who will have survived the time of Israel's troubles, the Islamic tsunami that's going to flood into Israel 1,000 times worse than what Israel experienced on October 7th. This distinction is important because the most estranged are being called home to Yisrael and to Yahweh, while those already in the promised land are being called into God's home and thus into the covenant. Those living in Yisrael need to accommodate and accept the massive influx of Yehudim that will be arriving from the United States and from the rest of the world. And the population of Israel may double by 2030 if the message of the Nesh is heeded But fortunately, God has a remedy even for that. For those Yehudim unwilling to listen, he has a white chariot. And that white chariot, over the course of 12 hours, leaving in the early morning of September 24th, the Shabat of 2033, the morning of the fulfillment of Towrah and the sacrifice of the red heifer, to a full solar eclipse. It's going to canvass the entire globe and going to find every Yehudim that remains on the earth that is at least open to renouncing religion and politics and accepting Yahweh and the message of Elia and Yada, who will read the Nesh. And they will all be brought into Jerusalem for this, the greatest show on earth. Now, as we have discovered, a time is coming when Yahweh is going to lift up and prominently display the Nesh sign and banner to accomplish this very thing. His plan was detailed in Yeshaya, Isaiah, throughout the 11th chapter. And so now you will find the words depicted on this Nesh among those. It's going to include those written in Yada Yahowah. It's going to include the Yahweh blog. We heard specifically through Zechariah, the second to the last prophet, that it's going to be a moving scroll. It's going to be enormous in the sky above the two witnesses. An introduction to God, observations, coming home, even Babel, Twistianity, and goddamn religion are all going to be scrolling, as well as episodes of these very programs. That's why we're doing them. There'll be a library of them. And I take comfort in knowing that every word found therein represents a devoted and honest attempt to accurately and comprehensively translate and convey Yahweh's words, and then commit them to an amplified translation such that they can be validated. And for those that say, "Oh, I already speak Hebrew. I don't need no, dadgun translation." Oh, yeah, you do. Because modern Hebrew is actually a corruption and a great departure from the Hebrew of the Torah and prophets. And your Hebrew needs to be cleansed of rabbinic transliterations, rabbinic diacritical markings, rabbinic malfeasance, because there is far more influence on the language of Hebrew that Jews in Israel speak from two outside influences than there is from the original Hebrew of the Torah. One would be rabbinic malfeasance, where they have deliberately tried to conceal the identity of Yahweh from you. And the other is that there are more loan words from English and modern Hebrew than any other language, because America's influence on technology and communication today. So you really need to have an amplified translation where you can check the original meaning of the word against dictionaries that define them as that word and its root were described and defined at the time that this was revealed. And collectively, what you read in these books is going to lead to contemplation and understanding, just as you get to that same place by listening to these programs. Yahweh wants the individual that is translating and compiling the Nesh to be Yada, to be known, so that Israelites, Ra'ah, look and pay attention to what he has written for their benefit at Yahweh's insistence. The Nesh is Yahweh's, making it consistent with the message of Moshe, Shamuel, Dod, Yashaya, Zechariah, Malachi, Hosha, Yoel, to name a few, and others. Based upon Yahweh's prophecy and his propensity to work through men rather than to dictate to them, Yahweh's Choder has risen to the occasion. He is scribing God's message as a highly useful tool. The Nesh sign is being composed based upon Yahweh's prophetic testimony, whether it is in the Yahowah blog as we look into this camera and face you directly, or it is through the diligence of these 35 books that you will find at YAHOWAH.com, or that are being presented based upon their incorporation into my life so that I can share them with you in these live streams. The conclusions and the insights are from the Torah, the Nabi, the Mizmor, and come by way of the seven spirits of Yahweh, including the Spirit of Yahweh. And this report is essential for God's people at this time. Yada was called and has been prepared for this moment and this mission. It is why there are three Zeroah: Moshe to convey Yahweh's message to mankind, Dod to live it, and Yada to bring Yehudah and Yisrael back to it. All three are necessary. Take any one of the three out of the equation, and nothing of value remains. Why? Because no one understands it, because no one lives it, because no one pays attention to it, because you can't capitalize on it unless you know who did what to whom and why. And there isn't a single rabbi, not a single pope, not a single priest, not a single pastor that understands any of this or have shared any of it with you. Not in 2,500 years. Unique among men, as is God's custom. Like Moshe before him, the Choder is well versed on the enemy opposing God's people. I know Islam and Twistianity and understand these two menaces better than anyone alive today, and maybe better than anyone who has ever lived. In fact, I would say it's likely that I know and understand Islam and its demonic nature, and Christianity and its satanic origins, both religions, better than anyone who has ever lived. And the proof are the 10 volumes of Goddamn Religion and Twistianity. You cannot read either of them and remain a Muslim or a Christian. Impossible. No one can ever read those 10 volumes and remain a believer in their religion. And you cannot read them and not understand exactly why Christianity was so hostile to God's people for so long, or that when Christians say, "Oh, we support Israel because Jesus, he was a Jew." No, Jesus never existed. And the Christian New Testament demonizes Jews to steal their inheritance. And Islam is satanic from the beginning. Allah is modeled after Satan. Muhammad was the worst man who ever lived by any rational standard. The Quran is the worst book ever written by any rational standard. And so we are dealing with the reality that if you want to protect Israel, if you want to save Israel, if you want Israel to understand what it is that God is offering you and what was taken from you and what the rabbis did to create Islam and Christianity. Both religions are the fault of the rabbis. Rabbis created Israel's greatest foes. And rabbis, even within their own religion, Judaism, are responsible for the diaspora and for the curse of Palestine. Your greatest enemies are these rabbis. I exist to undo the damage they have done for those who are willing to listen to Yahweh. God chose a man, a Nakri. that would reflect Dode's brilliance. He is the lesser luminary to Dode, the greater luminaries. Great light that he has shone upon the world by fulfilling Pesach Matzon B'Kodem B'Chafoi, writing this great commentary that he has written on the Torah. He is a passionate and articulate, intellectually astute, and courageous student of the Torah who has fallen in love with Yahweh. The Choder is a partner with the previous two Zeroah, sowing their seeds such that they would take root at this time and grow in preparation for a productive harvest on Shabuah and Teruah. Well, I have never seen myself in the company of these other men. It's not how Yahweh perceives me. And it is something that you need to embrace if you're going to survive. Well, I have always viewed myself as their beneficiary. That is not how Yahweh presents this role. Well, certainly I am their beneficiary. We're all their beneficiaries. But you don't know it. You can't capitalize upon it. The next 4 Moed Mikre do not happen without what Yahweh accomplishes through his Nakri, through the Choder, through the one who writes this Nesh. That's why he has 7 spirits of Yahweh. And in this case, this branch bears abundant fruit. It is why Yahweh inspired Solomon to speak of the Nakri, this observant foreigner, during the dedication of Yahweh's home atop Mount Moriah. And I have shared this time and again, and we have devoted numerous programs of Chokmah Choder to what was stated. But here it is now, and a time where if you want to understand what Yashayah 18:3 is saying, you need to know what was conveyed in 2 Chronicles 6. Because this is a consistent presentation of God's plan. It is being fulfilled exactly as he foretold. And he was not shy about telling his people about this. So we're going to conclude this program by yet another presentation of 2 Chronicles 6, the actual Sermon on the Mount. Because what follows is Solomon's, Dode's sons, commencement address to the children of Israel upon the completion of Yahweh's home, more commonly known as the first temple, but called the home for Yahweh's name at the time. It is being presented in the midst of temple gleaning behind him. It's the preeminent Sermon on the Mount. It is Solomon's single most important address. And after speaking about his father, Dode, Solomon foretold. So therefore, regarding someone else, the observant and discerning foreigner from a different ethnicity and geographic location, who will come to understand Ha-Nakri, who to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, Asher, is not of your people. Lo men am ata, this Yisrael. He will come from a different and distant country and a distant time, out of a land a great distance away from Yisrael, following a long interval of time for the express purpose of being a witness and providing answers regarding your important, tremendously empowering and distinguished, growth promoting and magnifying, astonishingly great Shem, your name, serving as the influence of your hand, of your ability to accomplish the mission, along with being Shazak, powerful, passionate, an individual who is prepared to lead, a very strong and influential person with a fighting spirit, who is ready and able to protect the people from harm, who is intensely prepared and resolutely capable, as a Zeroah, as the one who cultivates the seeds for the final harvest, such that it is productive, whom you have extended. When he arrives on the scene and chooses to pursue this, then he will help interested parties reconcile their relationship and provide those who exercise good judgment with the information and justifications needed to make a correct and reasoned decision regarding this familial relationship, this home and household associated with God. Dabarim ha-yomim, words of the day, 2 Chronicles 6:32. When you hear it coming out of the heavens, coming from the atmosphere, listen to what is revealed via the satellites from the sky within the location where you live. Then engage and act accordingly, doing everything under the auspices of free will. Endeavor to expend the considerable energy required to receive all of the benefits, doing everything consistent with the example and pattern that he has set and that he has spoken, which to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, this Nakri, this observant foreigner from a different ethnicity and geographic location who understands, has invited you to read, has invited you to accept, has proclaimed and offered to you about God for the express purpose of being a witness, who provides answers such that all of the people of the earth and of the land will have a genuine and ongoing opportunity to become familiar with Yada, to know, acknowledge, accept, and understand Yada, and thereby become familiar with your Shem, your name, coming to respect and revere you simultaneously, along with your people, Yisrael, individuals who struggle and wrestle with or engage and endure with God. And also so that they may know that truthfully, your family and this house, which to reveal the correct path to walk, to give meaning to life, I have built for the family. And it is designated and called by your name. Dabarim ha-yomim, words of the day, 2 Chronicles 6:33. I did not ask Yahweh to draw your attention to Yada Yahowah, only to help me write it correctly for your benefit. I did not ask Yahweh for the Yahowah blog, for turning my home into studios, for transforming people's lives so that we could do this for you, for all of these lights and the cameras and the microphones and the platforms for which to draw your attention to God. I didn't ask God to write any of these many hundreds of prophecies about what we're doing together. And yet, now I would be doing God a great disservice and a disservice to his people to disavow these prophetic pronouncements, especially at this time in the life of a floundering and besieged nation of Israel, when I am the only voice that can direct you back home to your salvation, to your reconciliation with Yahweh, your appreciation of your Messiah and King Daud. Yahweh wants Israel to listen to him and to come home. And not finding a Yehud who was willing to engage, God not only stooped to using a goy, he is pleased with what we've accomplished on his people's behalf. Not only with Yada Yahowah and with the YAHOWAH blog, but the entire family, how we have come together and rallied together to share Yahweh's message with his people at this time. So what's your response? After all, it's a fair question. Since Yahweh has asked you to listen to what he has to say and respond, doing all he asks. Well, thank you for this time and the Rainbow Studio of the YAHOWAH blog. I am your host, this Nakri, the Choder, Yada. Thank you for listening.